This recording will provide basic information about provider documentation within Meditech Expanse. The first step is to select the patient by highlighting on a status board, then click on the document button. You can also click on the document button from any time you're within the patient chart. You can see that this provider has some favorites already selected with their documents, and that's indicated by the yellow star. To see all of the documents that are available, you can click the Show All box and then scroll down a little and you can see all the different options. They would be selected in alphabetical order. You could also click in the search box and scroll through a list, also in alphabetical order. And then to add a favorite, you would just click on the star to make it yellow. When opening a document, you will notice that it is organized into sections. These are shown across the top in the header. They can also be seen by scrolling down. And they would go one after the other. There are two different views of these documents. I'm first going to show the default view of Review and Refine and show the different components. And then after that, switch to the Rapid Entry view to show the difference between those two. For any section, you can click on the header or the arrow to collapse or expand anytime you see that header. Some sections have data that is populated automatically. We'll see those as we go through the document. Sometimes there's results that are populated or text, as in this example. So some fields will have those populated and some the provider will need to make selections. Whenever there's a text box that can be typed into speech recognition or Dragon can be used to add to the text. And then anytime you want to choose from some text options that already exist, you would click on this A button with an arrow. That is used most commonly in the discharge summary document. In some of the sections, like the review of systems, there will be body sections down the column here, and then there may be selections that will be clicked on. Before we show this, just a note, this again, here's a narrative box. Anytime there's a narrative box, the text can be added. In the review of systems, there's just one section of selections per body system. You'll see more in another section later. When I click on the title here, the different selections appear. And when I make the selection, there's two different options. A left click will answer that question in a positive way. If I right click, it's a negative or a denies in the review of systems. So anytime a right click happens, it will be a negative answer. If there's a comment, there are three lines next to the selection. And if you choose that, it will open a comment box and text can be entered there. If you do add a comment to a selection, you can see that it shows up with parentheses. And to move to the next section, just open and you can see that the previous section body system will collapse and the next one opens. Click on the title and I see the options to select there. Going down through each body system, it would be the same. The patient history section will have all of the different options collapsed. So you will need to expand them and open them up to review them. To indicate that you have reviewed them, you can either click on the reviewed button next to the history, and that will change the date and the time over here on the right. You can also click the reviewed all button, and that will update each of the sections in the patient history section. The medication section for this document you can see is an example where the data has pre-populated. And depending on the document, there may be different things that populate into each section. The exam section is one of the most detailed and is only on several documents. It's not on every document. There are several options here. Some providers have chosen to build a narrative exam in this narrative section, and that actually will pull across from day to day, for instance, for a progress note, or you can set a typical or a normal that will be covered in another tutorial. So that's one option. Again, you see body systems and you will see, or sections, but you will see there are more choices within each section. The same way of choosing the options still applies. To move from one of these to another, you can click on the title and it will just open those boxes. And then to go to the next section, just click on there and it will collapse the one previous. You can see that as you move down through. They all have the same options, the same way of answering the questions. There is one other option that is a little more visible in the exam section. It's a way to select a bit more detail, and it's called branching. If there is an arrow where the comment lines would normally be, and that is selected, you can see that there's laterality. There's more detail and more options that I could select. So I could just say brachial pulses presence on the right, and you can see that my choice added to the response above. But there's also another option, I can see that by the arrow. So if I click on that, there's even more detail that I can add then by clicking on those branching arrows. The results section shows, again, more information that has pre-populated, lab results, result diagrams. And then in the exam, in some of the documents in this imaging section, there are pre-populated impressions from the radiologist. And this is built into the history and physical document based on the last exam for each type of exam, imaging exam. The provider can click on an attestation statement. They could add an impression of their own, or they can just leave this as part of the document. The impression is the only part that will come across from the radiologist report. The assessment and plan section is where the problem list will be documented. You can see that there are numbers, or there's a rank for the problems. If you want to change that right from this screen, and I click on one of those numbers, I can change that rank by just changing the number right there. To see more detail about the problem list, I click on Add Problem, and this opens the Problems and History overlay. I can add new problems by searching here. I can uncheck boxes or check them to add a new one of these existing problems to this document that may have been unchecked for some other reason. And then click Save, and that has added that problem. Within the assessment and plan section, I can either add narrative to each problem. There's a text box that is associated to each problem, or I can include the entire plan in this assessment and plan narrative box. At any time during the documentation, the user can preview their document. So I'm going to click on that so you can see, especially the assessment and plan and how that looks. The assessment and plan is often moved in the preview output section to the top of the document for users who are viewing the document afterwards, even though it was documented on at the end of the document. You can see that if a text had been added with a problem, it would show up right here under the problem name, but the narrative section that was as a plan at the bottom of the list will show up just like this. And then you can scroll down to see the other components of the document. The next option is to see the difference between this default view and the rapid entry view. When you click on the rapid entry view, each section is collapsed, and you can open those up to view in more detail. So I'm going to show first the review of systems. In this case, instead of having to click on the titles, all of the selections are viewable right away and they stay open. You would have to collapse the whole section or scroll down in order to see the next section. And in this case, if I do click to the next section small enough that it will actually collapse the patient history section and go to the med section. The exam is another example where it would be a pretty long section. You would need to scroll down, but it is more visible. All of the detail is much more visible in the rapid entry view. There are a few other buttons that you may see. Scroll back up here. And these are this button, add content, is used very rarely, almost never actually, but in case you would wonder what that is, it gives the ability to add a section individually to a document. You would have to be pretty familiar with the different sections to know which one you would want to add, and it would add it at the bottom, but that's an option. And then the other one that we'll cover today is the view previous. So this indicates that this exam section has been documented on before. And in this case, there are 5 other times when this has been documented. It may be a different user, but in this case, it's the same user. And when I select a different date from the one that I first viewed, it shows what could be applied. And if I wanted to add that documentation to my document, I could click apply and it would actually overwrite whatever I had selected before. The next topic will actually cover different ways to save a document or how to delete a document that might have been opened in error. The first example is how to save and draft. So I'm not ready to finish this document. I just click on the save button, and this will save the document in draft. You will always see a draft document in this document selection screen for yourself. But you can also see that in the electronic signature queue, and you could edit it from the electronic signature queue as well. You will also see that when we go to the provider notes tab. The second option is to sign the document as final. And so we click sign and click sign again, enter the PIN. And that document will then show up as signed in the provider notes tab. Before we go there, I'll show how to delete a pending document. This would happen possibly if I opened a document and I realize it's not the document template that I wanted, it's maybe the wrong patient, or maybe the wrong account number. If I have not saved anything, I can come up to the 3 lines next to the title, click on delete document, and I would get this message. This pending document will be deleted. When I say yes, as we will see, this document is not saved anywhere. It will not show up anywhere in the chart. A draft document, there could be times where there's a need to delete a draft document. It's partially been saved, but it has not been signed yet. Come up here again to these lines and click cancel document, and the message is a little different. This draft document will be canceled. I'm going to say no because we'll show you an example of what it looks like in the provider notes tab. So I'm going to the chart, to the provider notes tab, and you can see the different options, the different ways that these documents are appearing. The ones that say canceled were draft documents that were canceled. There's no paper icon that can be edited or made, no changes can be made to that document any longer. A signed document can be viewed, and we will add an addendum to a document. Must be a signed document. Click on the addendum button and add text in the narrative section. And that is signed, and the PIN is entered as well. A draft document can be edited. Here's the third way that you could enter, update a draft document. You would go to the edit button, and that would bring up the button that the whole document that you could then finish. The addendum, if one was made, views like this at the top of the document. This concludes the training content for provider documentation. For support with documentation, you can contact the Meditech provider support team by calling extension 3000 during normal business hours. Thank you for participating in this training.